Welcome everyone. Today I'm gonna talk about how you can move a very large amount of Redis data from one deployment or one cluster to another cluster using Python. So let's see what all we need to do to get this thing done. Let me first try to explain the situation here in a picture so that we all understand what basically we're gonna achieve here. So let me quickly open our whiteboard. If I just start putting things into the perspective, right? You have, let's say, one Redis cache. Let's say it is R1, and then you have got R2. Now, this is the one which needs to be moved here. So you can move the data from one Redis cache to another Redis cache. So for the use case here, what I'm gonna use is I'm gonna use Azure Cache for Redis, and that will basically have a feature called export import. But that export import feature is only available in the premium tier. So we can't use what Azure offers us out of the box if our Azure cache for Redis is not premium tier. Now, what I am going to do here is that I'm going to show you a couple of ways by which you can think and decide how you want to handle that situation. But let me first show you my two Redis cache, which is already deployed in my Azure subscription. So the first one, I'm gonna open this one. Its name starts with one. I'll use it as source. It's a fully managed Redis cache. So I go to the console. So it's like a Redis CLI, which you can also install and connect to. But if you just notice here, and if I say DB size, it's going to tell me that around 10,000 keys are there. I have got just 10,000 keys in my Redis cache. I can also check, I'll go back to the second Redis cache, not here. That's the one. And I use this console to also do a DB size. It has only 1,000 record. I clean it up. Careful with this command. It does delete everything. So if you run this DB size now, this second Redis cache, which is this one, it doesn't have any record. The first one has some record. Now I'll take three approaches, okay, to move data. The first approach, let's say I want to put it as approach number one. I say that one by one. Not very efficient way of doing it. So I'll read one key and move it here. Read another key, move it here. Read another key, move it here. All through Python code. So Python comes with a library called Redis. So whenever you are using that, you need to just do a pip3 install Redis, and this library is part of your working folder, and then you can just start using that thing. Now, a couple of things I might need for that is that let's say I want to go here and I use it later. And I go to one of my Redis cache and I'll find like details about access keys, etc. So I'm going to use these values to connect to my Redis cache, right? So this is my, let's say the server details. I have got my password and all of this stuff. So what I'm now going to do is that I'm going to open my Visual Studio Code and I will start showing you files one by one. So now the first one, if you notice here, so I have initialized the source Redis cache, and I'm using this Redis library with strict Redis, and the host is this one, port is whatever the port defined, and the passcode or the password is this. And I made sure that it's SSL true, which means that it's not compromised when data is in transit. And the destination is my second Redis cache, which is again the same format, the URL, the passcode, the SSL. And after that, I am basically calculating how much time it is taking. So what it is trying to do is that it is trying to scan all the keys. So by this scan iteration, I'm basically scanning all of them. So you can actually put a pattern if you want to read specific types of key. You can always, if you maintain a naming convention, you'll be able to pick them up and then use it. But what I'm additionally going to do is that I'm going to stop it at one, let's say, thing. So I'll say I count equals to 0. So I'll just say that. And then inside, I'll say I count 1. And then if I count is, let's say, greater than 10, I will do it only for 10. Break. So this should break my step, right? Exactly I did here. So I can just do the same thing here. So just for the demo purpose, so that you don't have to wait for a longer period of time to make it thing happen. As soon as there are 10 records moved, I'm fine. And what it is trying to do is that it is reading from the source, and then it is writing using that set method the same key and the same value, right? If you print the key and the value, you'll find there'll be additional single quotes, etc. available, which is taken care by the SDK, so you don't have to do that. But if you're dumping them into a file, the values, you need to make sure that you clean them up. So we'll clearly notice that when I say copying and the key name, it is going to show up in the list, that extra characters. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go ahead and say run this. So it is going to copy from 1 and move it to 2. And as you have noticed that in my machine, this 2 doesn't really have any record now. It's empty. So I'm going to run this, and I say Python 3, and I say Redis import, and it will start copying. So you can see that randomly it keeps reading the keys and it keeps writing them. And once it is done, it took around 8 seconds to copy all these record. So I am going to run the db size command here, and you will see 10 records is there. So if I say keys star, you will find the values also coming up in the list. So all the 10 keys have been copied. It's not 1 to 10, it is randomly picked up. You can see that it is getting picked up from any sequence. So when I inserted them in sequence, but when I read them, I can get any key at any given point in time. So that is there. Now it is there. So let me clear it up. We'll take another approach. This time, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use a different approach. So I will create a file and use that file to do the import, right? So I will show you that option. So say again, I'm not going to use the destination. It's only source because I'm just reading and creating the file. And I'll show you the file type. So I'm not going to run it for 100 record. I'll run it for 10 records. And then this time I'm going to say that data demo. I'll put it as demo. and txt. So what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to read the key and the value and replacing the single quote and the character B with a single quote ending, and wrapping them into double quote. And I'll show you the generated file, which will be created in the same folder called data demo txt uh, for import. And I say for, no, let's not put a big name because I have to type it again. So it is the file which is going to get created. So if I run this Python now, Python 3 Redis export. So it's like creating the export file for export. I'm not doing the export now. So you can see that the file called data demo.txt got created, and it is basically the command which Redis CLI uses to create the key and the value using set key and the value. So I wrapped the key with double quote and the value with double quote and use the command set. So if you use the Redis CLI, you will find that it's commonly used. So if I say Redis set kk vv, it's gonna go ahead and set the value. I'm not connected to the Redis CLI, but if I am connected, it will show up the value. Now this file is here. So this demo, data-demo is here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to run the Redis CLI. So if you say Redis CLI, it is installed. So I have installed it. So you can download and install from apt-get command, and it redis-tools is the name. So it will install the Redis CLI. It is trying to connect my local server, which doesn't hold Redis. So it's not working. That's fine. But I can provide extra information. So when I need to initialize this Redis CLI with my Azure Redis Cache managed service, first thing I need is the URL and the passcode. But also, in addition to that, I need one more thing. Let me show you that. If you go back and check this number one, not two, because now I'm not going to, sorry, number two, because I'm going to upload this to number two. So let me go ahead and advanced settings. If you open this advanced settings, you see that allow access only via SSL. Okay, let me highlight this. It is saying yes, and non-SSL port is disabled. Okay, so I have to say no. That means I'm going to allow non-SSL ports, and that port number will be 6379. So let me build that command first so that I can copy it again and again in the notepad. So when I bring the notepad up, I use this Redis CLI, and I can use any format. So I can start with a port, and I can start with a host, and host will be the URL of the Redis cache. So let me pick those values. So if I go to those overview and I copy this thing, I can paste it here. I can paste A, and then I can paste the passcode inside the A, which is this access key. So I'll copy the secondary access key. I can also use primary access key, and that is going to get, so I have got this. It should be fine. If I try to run this in the command prompt where my Redis CLI is installed, this is my WSL. So I just run it, and it's giving me just a warning. Okay, nothing else. If it is able to connect, then I can run this command. Okay, let me copy this. This is just to test whether it's working or not. I'm going to use this file as my input to upload this whole set of 10 records into this my Redis cache. Okay, so if everything is fine, it will connect to my Redis cache using all the information I have provided, and soon it should be ready with command prompt. While it is trying to do that, I just copied it, right? And then I go to my second Redis cache and I try to run this command. Set kk and vv. It is saying okay. So let's see. Ah, I deleted that. That's fine. So I'll say set kk and then I say keys. So you can see that right now I have only one key, that is kk, and the value should be. So if I say get, that's vv. Okay, that's the value. Okay, so it's going to work like that. So, but let me go back and see the. Shouldn't take that long. Must be something terribly wrong. Did I save? First of all, let me check. Advanced setting. No, I didn't save it. That's why it was not able to connect. So I said saved, and now I see that and I run it. So remember that I changed that to not no SSL, but I didn't save it, so it was not working. So I copied the line, this line, and I paste it, and it is going there. So I can say keys just like the black window. So I'm getting that key. Now this is setting. So I'll exit. Okay. Now this time what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the same command which I built earlier with an additional thing called pipe. And if I say so, and I can input the data from this data demo.txt, that file. And you can see that it is now telling me that the data transferred, waiting for the last reply received on the server, error 0, replicas, the replies 10. Now let's see how many data I have. Remember that I had only 2 of them. So now this file contains 10 rows. If I show you the file, 10 rows. So I should be having 12. Now the question to you, tell me how many records will be there. Before there were 2 and now 10. Will it be 12 or will it be 11? Let's see that. And I'll tell you why. Okay. So I have to first connect. No, not this one. I say this. And once I'm connected, I say keys star, and then I run this. I'll have 11, not 12. The reason why it is 11, because you remember that I copied this one and I entered it. So if the key exists already in the Redis, it's not going to insert it. Even if you provide that in the file, it is not going to insert the value because it doesn't insert duplicate keys. Then the whole thing will fall apart. So it is completely ignored. It's not going to throw you an error, which is very convenient. Okay, so you get 10 records. So this is the step number 2 or approach number 2, where I create a command file. I can build it like tens of thousands of rows and then pass it on. But what I have personally observed is that if you have a large file, then it will actually create a lot of challenges. It might get timed out. I've seen that. So I'm not sure if there is a foolproof solution for very large amount of data. So I did a little bit of research and I came up with this idea, and I'm gonna get it validated, but I want to share with you. So I'm gonna take the third approach, is that this pipe thing which I'm doing, right? This pipe, dash pipe I have used, right? The same pipe, if I use in the Python and build it up. Now this time, I have got both source and destination, and I'm going to run this only for, let's say, 20 records. Okay, this time a little bit more, and I'm going to format the key format the value. When I say format, that means I put a single quote at the before beginning and end of key and value, but I replace this B single quote and the single quote at the beginning with something. So which I can actually keep it. Basically, I can just replace the B and then keep it. So let's try that also. It's more easier to read. So I'll replace, no, that's the problem. So if you have a value in the key as a B, then it will be replaced. So let me just keep it like that. But what I can do, I can get rid of this second replace. I don't need to replace the single quote if I'm anyways putting the value, right? So I get the key. I don't need this thing, and I don't need to replace this thing. But do I really need this? I don't think I need it. But then I need to replace. So let me try, okay? All right. All right. So I'm gonna run this here and I'll exit and I'll say Python 3 Redis bulk pipeline. It's saying it is copying. So previously I had got around 11 records. Now total 20 records have been moved, all of them. And by the way, so if you look into the sequence, right, it is just taking the value and creating a pipe. It's not yet executing it. So if you have 10,000 records, so it'll create the pipe for 10,000 record. And only one time it'll go back to the server, that is destination server, to push it. So that's the bulk. So you're not going to hit the destination server every now and then. So you're going to hit it only once with all the data created in the bunch. So what I'm going to check quickly is how it now looks like here. Okay, so I'll say keys star. I've got 21 records. Previously it was 11, now plus 20, so 21 records. So it's working fine. Even if I just do a little bit of modification and replace the big single quote from the beginning and end, which I was trying to add, and remove the B single quote and the single quote from the key and value, it's going to go ahead. If I don't, let's say don't do it, let's try that because it's a Python, right? So if I just remove them and try to run this again, it is going to, is it going to add V thing? Let's just see that. It's a good check. When I say keys, yes, it adds the B single quote. It's not going to work. So I have to remove it. So you have to remove this from both the values because it is telling it's byte, and that's why it is B single quote. But I just replaced it. That's fine. So you can now see that this is getting executed only one time, and this is pretty fast. If you, let's say, make it a 100 record, okay, and if I go ahead and let's say flush all and I run this code, you see how quick it is. It is just taking time to read it, but writing is not going to hit the destination server unless the read is complete. So it's faster in reading, so always fast. And you can see that it's almost halfway through and it's now going to reach 100. And as soon as it reaches 100, it is going to push that through the line number 30, that is pipe.execute. And once it pushes that, the data will be saved. So I can go back to my destination server and I can say key star, and it's gonna tell me all the 100 records in the list. So it is quite efficient way of moving large amount of data in a bulk way, right? So that's better than doing one by one, better than doing through file. It is using the pipe command, the core of the CLI, and then using the most efficient and effective way of doing it. Right? So you can you can try that out. And as you know, like even if you have, let's say, uh, signal, you can split this thing into multiple things. You can identify what data gone. So all those different things you can even, let's say, create a file, okay, and from read from that file. Because why I'm telling is that if you notice the Redis, every time you read Redis, the sequence doesn't maintain. So my ideal approach would be to build a file, okay, that's not Redis, that's a text file, and keep all the key and the value tab delimited in that file. Read that file to in split mode. So let's say I will read only first 1,000 record, next 1,000 record, or split the file into multiple files, each file containing 1,000 records. And then through that, I create this pipeline object. The pipeline object, when I say this pipeline object. So when I say dot pipeline, this object. So I build this pipeline for, let's say, 10 files, each file containing 1,000 record. I execute this pipeline 10 times, each time for 1,000 record. So my 10,000 records is sure shot going to be entered into destination without me really thinking too much about how sequence is maintained, how can I make sure that no data is left out, because every time I read, if I put this condition like don't read more than 1,000, every time I read, I'll randomly get it, right? It's not going to give me things in sequence. If it is not going to give me things in sequence, I cannot really maintain that rhythm, right? It's difficult. So that's one of the ways which I think is it's probably the best way to handle this kind of large migration. Have a file created, how much big that file would be, okay, but that have that file first, or put it in the database. Let's use data source. Let's use something like Azure table storage, or let's use something like NoSQL storage, which can store the data, right, and a key value pair storage. You store it and then you read it from there in sequence. That becomes like solid and you're not going to miss anything. Okay, so with this, thank you very much, hope you have enjoyed.